Carma Purpura disappeared after a late night at a truck stop in Indianapolis. The next day, police found her phone, her clothes, even her ATM card inside the cab of an 18-wheeler. But Carma herself was gone. 4 years later, her body was discovered off a parkway in rural Kentucky, more than 200 miles from where she vanished.
In Indianapolis, killed her, stripped her, dumped her body, and kept the clothes in a bloody bag. That's what he did.
And Carma's case isn't the only one, not by a long shot. America runs on its highways. Every morsel of food, fuel, and medicine depends on truckers, men, and women who keep this country alive. But buried in that world are predators who've turned the open road into a hunting ground. The FBI has linked over 450 victims to long-haul travel and identified more than 800 possible suspects. So the question is, how many killers are still out there today, hiding in plain sight among the endless miles of America's highways? This is Project Strangeville, and trust me, you're not going to want to miss this one. On a warm night in June 2007, 31-year-old Carma Purpura was last seen at a truck stop in Indianapolis. She was a mother of two, struggling but trying to keep her life together. To friends, she was vulnerable but resilient. To investigators, she became a missing person almost overnight. The next day, the police stumbled onto something chilling. Inside the cab of an 18-wheeler, they found Carma's belongings: her phone, her clothes, even her ATM card. But Carma herself was nowhere to be found. For years, her family waited, hoped, wondered. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months, until 4 long years had passed with no sign of her. Then in 2001, workers discovered human remains along a rural Kentucky parkway. The body was identified as Carma's. She'd been dumped more than 200 miles from the truck stop where she was last seen. The brutality wasn't just in the killing, it was in the distance, in the time, in the way her story disappeared from headlines while her family carried the weight of not knowing. But Carma's case wasn't unique. As investigators dug deeper, they realized she was one name on a list that was growing larger every year. Women vanished near highways, women last seen at truck stops, women who never made it home. Different states, different investigators, different case files gathering dust in different rooms. But the pattern was there, hidden in plain sight. And with each new discovery, the question grew louder. Was this the work of one killer or many? How many times have you been on the road late at night and had to stop at a truck stop? Hell, I just did it a few weeks ago driving up the coast with my kids, and not once did it cross my mind that I could have been walking them straight into a predator's den. I'd be willing to bet Carma felt the same exact way. I mean, her stuff was found in a truck cab, and 4 years later, her body shows up 200 miles away. I can't even imagine what her family went through, not knowing where she was all this time. And the scary part, she's just one of more than 450 victims linked to cases just like this. And what we're about to get into, it gets worse. So let me ask you, how likely are you to pull off for a late night nap on your next trip? Stick with me, hit that like and subscribe, and let's see how the FBI finally got involved. Lucille Greta Carter was 44 years old, a Birmingham woman known for her sharp sense of humor and the way she can make friends with anyone. But in 2007, Greta's life ended in a way so cruel it shocked even veteran investigators. She was found stuffed inside a trash bin, naked, a plastic bag taped around her head, shot with a .22 caliber pistol. It was brutal, it was personal, and the Birmingham police, it was their problem to solve, their killer to catch. But Greta's murder wasn't isolated. In Indianapolis, detectives were still haunted by the disappearance of Carma Purpura, only to learn years later her body had been dumped in Kentucky. In Oklahoma, a string of women kept turning up dead along I-40, their cases piling up with no clear suspect. And in Texas, bodies were found near truck stops off of I-35 and I-45, leaving rangers to wonder if a predator was hunting the state's busiest corridors. Each department thought their murders were local, their problem, their killer. But they weren't. That's when the FBI jumped in. They saw what the local departments couldn't, a pattern stretching far beyond county lines. By 2004, the number of cases had grown too large and too connected to ignore. That year, the Bureau launched the Highway Serial Killings Initiative, pulling unsolved cases from across the country into one place. The picture was staggering. More than 450 victims tied to murders near interstates, truck stops, and motels. Over 800 possible suspects. On a map, the bodies formed clusters. Along I-40, stretching from North Carolina to California. Along I-10, cutting across the deep south from Florida to Texas. Along I-70, slicing through the Midwest. These weren't random dots, they were corridors of death, running parallel to the same highways truckers drove every day. And the killers knew exactly how to use those roads. Murder someone in Alabama, you're in Georgia by morning. Dump a body in Oklahoma, you're halfway to New Mexico before the paperwork even clears. Mobility gave them cover, jurisdiction gave them freedom, and without the FBI stepping in, the connections might never have been made. You know, I want to be clear about something. This isn't about blaming truckers. 99% of them are just out there grinding long hours, moving freight, trying to get home to their families. But if you were a predator, man, you couldn't ask for a better setup. You're always moving, nobody questions it, and the second you cross the state line, it becomes somebody else's problem. And that's why the FBI had to step in, because no single department could see the big picture. And once they did, they started connecting certain murders to certain men. Guys with criminal records, guys with motives, and in some cases, they were still on the road when the police closed in. That's where we're headed next. July 12th, 2007, a truck stop outside Nashville, Tennessee. Police pulled over a long-haul driver named Bruce Mendenhall. Inside his cab, they found blood, a lot of it. The DNA of multiple women was scattered across the truck, on rags, clothes, even his personal items. They recovered weapons, ammunition, and maps that marked his routes. What began as a routine traffic stop turned into the arrest of a suspected serial killer. Mendenhall was later convicted for murdering 2 women, including 25-year-old Sarah Nicole Hulbert, who was last seen alive at that very truck stop. He was tied to more cases across at least 6 states, but he wasn't the only one. In 1990, truck driver Robert Ben Rhoades was caught in Arizona after a woman escaped his rig. Police discovered his truck was a torture chamber on wheels, chains, handcuffs, and a setup he'd used to keep women captive for days. He later confessed to murdering at least 3 women, but investigators believe the real number could be much higher. And there were others. Men like Perry Baldwin, arrested in 2020 after DNA linked him to cold case murders from the 1990s. A long-haul driver, Baldwin was tied to victims found strangled and dumped off highways in multiple states. Different names, different trucks, different highways, but the same pattern kept repeating. Women vanishing near truck stops, and drivers who turned out to be predators hiding in plain sight. You hear stories like that and it just stops you cold. A truck turned into a rolling torture chamber, or a guy with blood from multiple women hidden all over his cab. And that's a whole new level of evil. And those are only the ones that got caught. For every Mendenhall or Rhoades, how many more are out there driving the same highways, pulling to the same truck stops, and no one has a clue? But we need to remember, the killers aren't the only story here. The real story is the women who didn't make it home, who they were, why they were targeted, and why their cases took so long to even get noticed. That's what we're about to find out. It's easy to talk about suspects and cases like they're files in a cabinet, but the real story is the woman who never made it home. Take the case in Wyoming. April 1992, a young woman, just 20 years old, pregnant with her first child. Friends described her as shy but hopeful. Finally starting to believe her life was turning a corner, she never made it. She was strangled and left on the side of the road. Nearly 30 years later, DNA tied her case to a long-haul driver, Perry Baldwin. Or Candace Candy Walsh. She was 20, loved music, and was known for her wild laugh. She left Florida with dreams of traveling, chasing something better. In 1981, her body was found in Tennessee. For decades, she was just another Jane Doe, until new forensic work finally gave her name back. And then there was Stephanie Ann Douglas, 25 years old, a free spirit who bounced from job to job but always came back to her family in Arkansas. In 1988, she was found in a ditch off of I-40, beaten, strangled, and discarded like trash. Different women, different states, same story. Most came from vulnerable backgrounds. Escorts trying to scrape by, runaways hitching rides, women battling addiction. Victim society looked past, and that's exactly why predators targeted them. In case after case, the killers counted on no one noticing. No headlines, no pressure, no family pushing police for answers. And for years, they were right. Today, the FBI's Highway Serial Killings Initiative still keeps a database of these victims. Many have names, far too many don't. Some are still listed as Jane Does, their families never even knowing where they ended up. And here's the terrifying part. This isn't history. It hasn't stopped. Women are still being found near highways, their cases unsolved, their killers still unknown. The FBI is fighting to catch up. Technology is changing the game, making it harder for predators to hide. But that's not the end of this story. Not yet. Because before we get there, we need to ask the hard question. Why and how is this still happening today? This is just plain heart-wrenching. And I can't imagine those poor families whose kids are listed as Jane Does in that database. What a god-awful feeling not knowing what happened or having any closure on their whereabouts. You know there's still a small sliver of hope too, where they think that kid's gonna come walking through that door. And that's what makes this so hard to stomach. How can someone see them as disposable? These victims were daughters or sisters, mothers, and friends. So why isn't more being done? And that's what we're about to find out. For all the FBI's progress, these murders keep happening, and the reasons aren't hard to see. First, the highways themselves. A killer can dump a body in one state, cross into the next, and be gone before anyone even realizes there's been a crime. That means different police departments, different evidence labs, and no one connecting the dots fast enough. Second, the victims. Most of these women came from vulnerable backgrounds, escorts, runaways, women struggling with addiction, cases that didn't make front page news, cases that didn't always get the resources or attention they deserved. And third, the evidence. When bodies are dumped along the road, exposed to the elements for days or weeks, forensic evidence disappears fast. By the time investigators arrive, there's often little left to work with. Those three factors, mobility, marginalized victims, and lack of evidence, created the perfect storm, a storm that predators learn to exploit. And it's why even today, women are still being found near highways. Their cases unsolved, their killers unknown. But before we close this story, you need to know something important. The game is changing, and it's making it harder than ever for predators to hide. Although the game is changing for law enforcement, there's still a lot more to be done, and I'm going to tell you how you can help. But before I do, hit that like and subscribe. It helps us keep digging into stories like this, and there are plenty more that need to be told. So why is this happening? We see the MO. Highways give killers perfect cover. Victims our individual society too often ignores, and evidence that doesn't last long enough to find anything substantial. But here's what's changing. Technology, DNA databases, genealogy testing, interagency cooperation, they're cracking cases that sat cold for 30 years. That's how Perry Baldwin was finally caught. That's the hope. But law enforcement can't do it alone. If you see something suspicious at a truck stop or a rest area or on the road, you can report it. You can always call in tips to the FBI hotline at 1-800-CALL-FBI or submit information at tips.fbi.gov. Even small details can help connect the dots. But the truth is, you and I know it doesn't bring back the hundreds of women that are already gone. And it doesn't erase the fact that the killers are still out there today, driving the same highways, pulling to the same truck stops, and hiding in plain sight. So next time you pass a line of semis idling under the lights, remember, almost all of those drivers are just doing their job. They're keeping America alive. But it only takes one predator to turn the open road into a graveyard. This is Project Strangeville, and the road only gets darker from here.